Peymon, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Kim.
I'm excited for this conversation because I personally feel like taxes are a scam. I've been increasingly just really, nobody likes to give their money away, right? Nobody likes taxes, but I really feel that it's an assault. I feel like, for example, property tax to me just seems like an absolute assault. We don't really own our homes. If we don't pay the taxes, the government takes it. I mean, it's just income tax again, just feels like an absolute scam. You haven't filed what taxes are you not paying and you've not paid openly since for 30 years?
Over 30 years, I have not paid any income taxes, payroll taxes, no corporate taxes. Federal taxes are very limited in who they apply to. They do not apply to people in the 50 states except oil taxes and a few other excise taxes.
And this is legal. So you legally don't have to pay federal taxes at no federal taxes at all except for you said
That's
oil.
right. This is the Internal Revenue Code, Kim. This is federal tax laws. The Bible of the IRS is right here in my hand as you see it. This is what the IRS is supposed to follow and enforce. Okay, all this confusion of 10,000 pages of gobbledygook has been done on purpose. The definitions are hidden at the end, not at the front of it, so to confuse you and to let you not know that it does not apply to the people of the 50 states mostly. Only oil taxes and very few other excise taxes apply to the people of the 50 states.
So you still have to pay state taxes.
Yes, you have to pay property tax, sales tax, gas tax, all those local taxes. That's what pays for the sheriff, police, and the court system to protect you, for the roads and schools and firemen. All this that we expect from government
Yeah.
are paid by our country taxes, the state taxes, local taxes, not the federal taxes.
What are federal taxes supposed to what do they claim they're using our federal taxes for?
Well, constitutionally, they're supposed to be there to defend us from foreigners, from bad guys, you know, and 18 specific powers that the federal government was given: foreign relations, foreign commerce, very few things. The federal government should be over 90% smaller than what it is today if we were to go by the Constitution.
This is disheartening to hear because now that you're saying it, I think a lot of us just don't think about it. But now that you're saying it, it makes so much sense. You're right. All the things that the government provides for me. Well, I live in Los Angeles, so I don't feel like they provide me very much, but they tax the hell out of me, and I don't get much for it, except a lot of homelessness and dirty streets and whatnot. But the state tax, you're right, is what is supposed to be funding the
Mhm.
schools, the fire department, the police department, the roads that I drive on, right? All of that is done by state tax. So what the heck is federal tax for? And you're saying, oh, it's for defense. It's for our defense budget. That's essentially what it's supposed to be for.
Well, it's been used for corruption, waste, wars, criminality, cover up the criminality of the DOJ, FBI, CIA. They've turned it against us. It's become tool enslavement. The federal government is supposed to have only a few specific powers given to it by the states in the late 1700s. And now, but because they were able to deceive us to give our money to them with the income and payroll taxes, now they have all this money they're using to go in the states and enslave the people of the states in America.
Wow. Okay. Tell us your story. So you're from Iran and you came here in 1977. So right before the revolution happened. Tell us what made you come here to the United States. What was and how did you get to the point where you realized, wait a minute, I don't have to pay these federal income tax. It's a scam.
Well, I came because my father wanted me to get a good education in America. So that's why I came when I was a sophomore in high school. In 1980s, in my economics classes, I learned that what free market is really all about. That America is not obviously, it's not a free market anymore. It's a semi-socialistic war state. And so I became a Libertarian Party member and activist in 89 as soon as I became an American citizen. And then in 1992, I heard on a radio program that income tax is voluntary. I went to a seminar And this lady showed me the law. It blew me away when I say, wow, this is not opinion. This is the law, the federal income taxes and laws that you're talking about. I said, wow, we've been deceived and lied to. All we have to do is to defund the crooks in the federal government and support people like Congressman Ron Paul to get elected, represent the American people, and have freedom once again in America.
Okay, so explain how, I mean, they've been jailing people for not paying taxes. I feel like if you don't pay taxes, they do come after you. So how is it that they're legally able to go after people for not paying federal income tax when if they like isn't this how they got Al Capone? Didn't they get him for tax evasion?
True. Vast number of people that they put in prison, though, for over taxes are people that file 10 for income tax confession trap forms. That form you sign under oath. You swear you owe the IRS money under oath, and you subject yourself with a rope around your neck to 3 different federal crimes for which you can go a combined 9-year prison sentence. And you didn't know that when you filed that 1040 form. Get your 1040 out that you filed last time. You see, he's right. I've signed under penalty of perjury. I don't know what that means, the small print. My accountant didn't tell me. That's how they get you. So if you don't file, IRS has a much, much harder time coming after you. There's about 80 million non-filers, Kim. You see
80
80
million
million?
non-filers in the
Yeah.
United States.
According to the IRS's best numbers, it's about 80 million people.
And so you're saying as long as you don't file the paper. So when you're filing the paper, that is when then you're saying, okay, I swear to you, I'll pay this. It's like a contract now.
That's
And then
right.
you break the contract if you don't actually make the payment after you file the paperwork. But if you
Or
don't
you
file at
cheat.
all,
Or you cheat. You list some income and not others. You make a phony deductions, phony expenses, exaggerate them. All those things because you claim everything on the 1040 form is true, correct, and complete when you don't understand what you signed. This accountant, CPA, claims he knows what you're signing and you're trusting him with your freedom with 9 years of prison time. See, he's making money off of you with the 1040 form, just like the hospital and doctors make money off of you when you took the corona jab. Every time they give a vaccine, they made money. Every time they tested you for corona, they made money. Put you on a ventilator, they made money. On the death certificate, they put on corona, they make money. The accountants are there to make themselves rich while enslaving you for the IRS.
okay, so I just Googled it. I Googled federal income tax is voluntary, and it comes out IRS government. They pop up right away. The requirement to pay taxes is not voluntary and is clearly set forth in Section 1 of the Internal Revenue Code, which imposes a tax on the taxable income of individuals, estates, and trusts as determined by the tables set forth in that section.
Mm-hmm. Now, that is half truth. But they don't tell you, Kim, is who is that individual. They let you assume it means, oh, all American people like me. I'm a U.S. citizen. What you didn't know is in the Internal Revenue Code, the term United States is for tax purposes, District of Columbia. District of Columbia citizens, they have to pay the income tax on the 1040 form. And they had you believe on your own that because you are for nationality purposes, U.S. citizen, that it applies to you when it does not.
How many times have so for 30 years, you've not paid the federal government a dime?
Over 30 years, sis. Yeah, that's
Over
right.
30
And they
years.
know me. We've been in court more times, many times. I've been in tax court and I beat them. With the IRS appeals, I beat them over $600,000, zeroed out completely. It's on my website, freedomlawschool.org. IRS had me on the criminal investigation at least 3 different times that I know of, going back to 1994, the first time. I had events about exposing government corruption. The IRS wanted to get the records of it. And I sued them and forced the criminal investigator to withdraw his summons of the hotel records. And these are published. on my website, freedomlawschool.org. People can see for themselves. But they never try to put me in prison because they know there is no law requiring you and me and people of the 50 states to file and pay income tax. But as long as the corrupt major media keeps us deceived, making us believe we're slaves, we go along and continue being slaves, sign those 1040 forms.
So have they ever been able to get you at all? Like, did they force you to pay a fine? Have they ever put you in jail at all in any of their attempts?
No jail time. And in over 30 years, I've not filed or paid $1. They have not even taken $1 from me for over 30 years.
But have they found you guilty of something and then you just didn't have to go to jail and you didn't have to pay them anything because it was just like,
Well,
whatever?
I did have a case that the crooked court, just like the Trump case, they ignored the law and facts and ruled against me. Yes, I had that because that's a civil case, not a criminal case. But
Okay.
even in that case, they have not ever billed me. A year ago, that case was done. They don't even bill me to see how much I owe because they know that doesn't matter. They don't want me to wake up the American sheeple, the slaves, to free themselves.
Right.
So they want to get me criminally, but I'm nothing wrong.
So how many times have you said the first time they went after you was when?
94.
94. And at that point, you hadn't paid income tax, federal taxes for how long at that point?
At that time, it was over a year. And I was teaching other people at that time to
Okay.
stop filing and paying income taxes.
So that's why
That's
they
when they
went
came
after
after me
you
because
because
I was
1
so
year.
vocal.
Yeah, 1 year, right? Because 1 year doesn't seem like much. They don't really go after people after 1 year of not paying taxes. Plenty of people don't pay taxes for a year or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10, and then they have to catch up and pay taxes. But it was because you were vocal. So they not only saw that you were not paying your taxes, but then you were like, "And you don't have to pay taxes either. Let me show you the
That's
code."
right. They looked at me officially as a potential fraudulent tax protest promoter.
Okay. What did they come after you for that time? Was it for tax evasion?
No, they that investigation after a year and a half closed up.
So they didn't even charge you with anything.
No, there was no, I've done nothing wrong. There is no law requiring you or me to pay income taxes. There's no your taxes I'm not paying. What I'm saying is they deceived us to believe there's a law that requires us to file income taxes when there's
Right.
none.
Okay, the second time they went after you.
Second time they met after me was back in, let me see, think about that. Was in 2003. They approached me claiming I am an abusive tax shelter promoter.
Okay.
And I
What does that
wrote them
even
to
mean?
say, this is a bunch of nonsense you're talking about. And I challenged them on that. They backed off. But for 16 years, Kim, they kept that investigation going until 2016. They officially closed it. They couldn't find anything wrong with what I'm doing.
I mean, this is and so have they ever you've taught a lot of people to not pay federal taxes as well. Have any of them ever experienced the same sort of, I guess, witch hunt?
All of my students who came to me clean since 2001 and stayed with me, none of them have gone to tax prison or had the IRS levy their bank account paycheck or take their home or business or their property. None of them gone to jail. But I've had people come to me with pre-existing messy cases.
Okay.
I've tried to help them, but couldn't help them.
Yeah, because at that point they've already had a problem in the past and maybe they filed and so now that they filed they have to pay, right? Because they signed their name on the document saying that they would pay. So then it would be so when they get people for tax evasion, it's not really it's is it actually tax evasion or is it something else because they signed the document?
You sign a document. Usually it's tax evasion because you sign that piece of paper under oath, line 37, you say, I owe you IRS this much, and you don't pay.
Right.
Or you make fake deductions or expenses or, hide your money, stuff like that. Whereas me, I just openly do not file, do not pay. And I teach Americans to do the same thing. And we protect them if they want. We have a Restore Freedom plan to not be the swamp and restore our families, ourselves, and restore the freedom movement by funding freedom lawsuits, freedom media, and freedom politicians to represent the interests of the American people per the U.S. Constitution.
So all these times, how many times have they gone after you total? How many
Oh
investigations
gosh, that I know about a half a dozen times.
that you know about? They could have some sneaky ones behind your back that you don't know about.
Yeah.
So this must have cost you. I mean, it's one thing to not pay the
Yeah.
taxes, right?
I did all myself. Without an attorney, I always beat them myself.
With no attorney.
With no attorney. I did all the legal work myself, and I beat them. In fact, back in 2009, when they came after me, Kim, and they imposed on me over $660,000 of taxes for 13 years of tax liens. It took me 2 years, and the IRS appeals and the U.S. Tax Court officially zeroed out and removed all of those tax liens.
But when you have a tax lien on you, there are some consequences to that, right? Like even if they're wrong, them just even putting the lien on you, wouldn't that prevent you from being able to buy a home or be able to get loans or even sell your home?
Tax liens actually are not very important at all because a lien is a claim on your real estate that you have if you want to sell or refinance it. A levy is what hurts when they take your bank account or paycheck. And that, you have a lot more protections to stop them.
From a levy.
Levy is what really hurts people.
Yeah.
But for levies, there's more protection than law. You get a hearing before the IRS attempts to take your money. So if you ask for a hearing, you can beat them, and at worst case minimum, delay for many, many years. For example, the case I had in court that they haven't billed me is for 2001 to 2006. They came after me in 11, and here on 24, I've not received a bill from them.
So are they saying, well, you owe us because they're looking at you do file state taxes. So they're seeing the government is aware of what you're making, what you have, right? Because they see the tax. Are they looking at the state filings? And then they're saying, well,
I live in
Peymon,
Florida. There's no state income tax in Florida. And most states, like California, follow the federal law definitions and forms. If you owe no federal income tax, you owe no state income tax either.
how does Florida do that then? So if you're not paying federal taxes and you're not having to pay Florida state taxes because they don't have it, and there's some other states that don't, how does Florida pay for your police and your roads? And is that from sales tax?
They have sales tax and property tax.
Property tax.
And not being a bunch of communists like in California, New York, and Hawaii, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Not paying for all the illegal aliens in the hospitals that go there and say, oh, here I am, illegal alien, cover me. They don't pay for that stuff in Florida.
So then how did they know what to go when they came after you and they said, okay, this is what we think you owe us? How would they even know if you're not filing any taxes at all, not even in the state?
In my case, they actually made up some numbers because says, oh, because you must have had so much income. And I went to court and I said, look, the law says you have to prove your numbers are based upon something. But the crooked judge ignored it. Said, well, I won't decide this issue right now. We're just going to go on and say that the government side is heavier than yours. And that's how the judges can be so corrupt, ignore the law rule against you. But know this, Kim. In America, there's only 31 U.S. tax court judges. Every non-filer has a right to a trial in case the IRS comes after you. Filers give up that right. Because when you file under oath, you say, I owe you this money, IRS. With 80 million non-filers, there's way too many of us. They cannot come after all of us. We stop filing, stop withholding on our paychecks at our job, which people can do for free on our website, freedomlawschool.org, and the game's over. We defund the federal government.
So do they, when they, this is just so incredible. The law can't be that obvious and simple, right? I mean, it can't in that big book that you've got. That's a huge book that you're showing us. I mean, this thing's fat. How many pages are in that thing? It looks like 20,000 pages.
10,000 pages.
10,000 pages.
The truth is hidden in the law books in plain sight.
Yeah, but it can't be that obvious. It doesn't say in the fine print in the very back of the book, by the way, federal taxes are totally voluntary. I mean, it's got to be much more complicated than that to get it
It's
to
a
the
little bit
point
more
where,
complicated. Here's what's
okay,
going on. The founding fathers were patriots. They did not want you to become a slave of the new agent of the states, the federal government. So what they did, they said the federal government cannot tax American people directly except with these severe restrictions. And it was done that way only a few times in the late 1700s and early 1800s. But they want to impose a tax to be able to rob the American people to pay the interest on the loans that the Federal Reserve Bank, privately owned, was going to make to the federal government. So they use deception to make you believe that you owe the tax. They had the 16th Amendment so-called ratified to make you believe that Congress now can tax you directly when they can't. Because America, Kim, is not one country. We are 50 countries in a union like the European Union. You have Germany, France, and Italy in a union.
yeah,
So every state in America is a country of its own. The federal government has limited power and jurisdiction. And this, Kim, we're not taught in a public school system. I
right.
used to believe, like you, everybody else, it's the federal government above the states, above the people. It's the other way around. It's the people above the states, above the federal government. And the 10th Amendment of the Constitution clearly reminds us that the federal government has only limited powers delegated by the states. Everything of the power the states retained. The federal government never had the power to directly tax you the way they're doing. But for over 100 years, it scammed us because the truth was hidden in the law books.
Hmm.
Just like, as you know, the corona jab vaccine is technically a mRNA gene therapy. It's not a
Right,
vaccine. But who goes looks at the medical literature to find that out?
right,
Almost nobody.
right,
That's
right.
done here with the law as well.
So you said that they've been doing this for over 100 years. So federal income tax has been in effect since when?
1913.
That's it?
Yes, for over 100 years, we prospered and grew, never had it or needed income tax. So we don't need income tax to be safe in America, to grow and be prosperous.
Why did anybody agree to start paying in 1913? All these Americans were just paying state taxes at that point. They weren't paying any federal government taxes. Then the Fed comes along and says, now you're going to have to pay us taxes. Why would any American, why didn't that cause a revolution or a revolt of some kind?
Because back then the rate of tax was really low. It was 1% to 5%. To pay the 5% rate of tax, you had to make over $200 million in today's money. So very few people were affected by it.
Hmm.
So they got declared in people's minds that it applies to you, but not right now. The rate is very low to very rich people. And over the decades from 1913 to 1930s, in 1930s, now they started it Social Security taxes. Okay. And that
Hmm.
applies only to people in the 4 U.S. island territories of Guam, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, and American Samoa. But they didn't tell you that definition. So, and it was a very low rate of tax there also. And they just slowly crept up the rate of tax and have you believe that you have to do it. And then they use World War One
Yeah.
and World War Two. We had to mobilize and get the bad Germans, have withholding from your paycheck. So they use war and deception to have us become slaves.
It's astonishing that people didn't have to pay any of these taxes before 1913, and suddenly they just kind of cropped this up on us. But I could see how they did it slowly. We're like the boiling frog, right? In the pot of water that they slowly turned up the heat and slowly turned up the heat to where we are now, where federal income tax is outrageous. I mean, it's taking 20, 30, 35, 40% of people's incomes.
Mhm.
The state doesn't even take that much. State tax is less. And in
Mhm.
reality, you're right when you brought it up that, well, all the things that I enjoy that the government is supposed to pay for really comes from the state. So
Mhm.
why is the state charging me? And I live in California. Why are they charging me less than the federal government? What is the federal government doing for me?
Mhm. They're supposed to be only protecting you from bad guys, but the U.S. military is not used to defend our borders and from Mexico. that used to protect Ukraine or Israel or
Right.
Iraq or Afghanistan destroyed. We don't need this military either. We can cut the military by over 90% and still be safe. The federal budget is criminality and corruption. And right now, as you see, the DOJ, FBI, CIA, they're all being turned upside down, used against the American people, January 6 demonstrators, and putting Donald Trump in prison because he is not one of the crooked candidates like Obama, McCain, Bush, Clinton, not them, or Biden. That's what they're using money for. Why
Mhm.
should we pay our enemies to keep enslaving us, Kim?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think that even when it comes to security, national security, and staying safe, the states could handle it. The states have their own national guards. I mean, that's what Texas is battling right now when it comes to the border. They're saying, why
Mhm,
can't we handle it? Why do we have to
mhm.
wait for the federal government has to do something? We want to do it. We want to take care of it ourselves. It's our border. And there's
Exactly.
a battle going on over that. But in reality, states should be able to have their militias, their national guards. And then if there is a war and we're infringed upon, then maybe the federal government at that point could have the power to rally
Mhm,
all the troops together and say, now we're
mhm,
going to go to war in a national battle because we're,
mhm,
we're having a crisis at the southern border, or
mhm,
Canada's decided to invade us, for goodness
mhm,
sakes. Now we got to go up north and defend our borders or something. You're
mhm.
right. Well, I mean, so there's no need for this massive military industrial complex that they're taking our money for. But even then, the massive military industrial complex doesn't account for all of the money they take from the American people. What are they doing with all of the rest of the money?
Well, making America a communist, socialist state. For example, Social Security taxes is one of the most terrible taxes we have because it separates the grandparents from the children. If you watch the TV series Waltons in the 70s, the grandparents live with the children and help them with the grandchildren. And that's the way it was in America since our founding and before. But now the grandparents are given money by the federal government that's been stolen from the children and grandchildren to go live over there away
The
from the
family,
children.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
then rather than taking your parents in old age, oh, we send them to old people's home by some stranger out there. So everything is being done through government. We have in America socialist healthcare. It's called the emergency room of the hospital. You walk in there, they take care of everybody through the federal government because it's socialism. So they're destroying our free enterprise system and making us slaves.
What would you say the alternative? I understand the point. I'm Vietnamese, so we live in multi-generational homes. That's the way we were raised and taught. My mother lives with my grandmother and takes care of her. When I was a kid growing up, our grandmother would still live with family and raise the children while the parents would go off to work. So there was no daycare needed. And then now that grandma's 95 years old, or older than that, actually,
Mhm,
now the family takes care of her, and we all live together. So
mhm,
that's a cultural thing, and I think you're right. I do think that the American way when it comes to that, it does it for families, we've got this idea that, okay, you turn 18, you get out of the house, you move away, and then you get a college degree or something, and then you come back and you get your own home where you live with your family and you're away from your family, right?
mhm,
And it really is destructive in a lot of ways
mhm,
to the families. I think one of the reasons why Asians excel so well here in the United States when they
mhm,
immigrate over is because of the family unit is strong. Family unit's
mhm,
very strong.
mhm,
Um, so I understand that point, and I think though it would be, I think a lot of people would be, if they didn't grow up maybe the way you or I did with
mhm,
that family value set, they might be very resistant to the idea of, what? You're going to want my parents to live with me? No way. Not happening. I want to be on my own and free. We're Americans. We like that freedom. So there might be that, that culture shift I think will be difficult to get people back. Like if we said, okay, we're cutting off Social Security. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't have anybody to rely on. And there's a lot of people who their families are jerks and they just wouldn't take them in.
mhm. But you see, all those problems over time could be handled. But we got to go back to the Constitution and enforce our laws. There is no law requiring the people of the 50 states to file and pay income tax. Only citizens and residents of Washington, D.C., and federal workers who go work in D.C., they have to pay federal income taxes. We have prosperity America. American people are on debt to credit card companies. 3 out of 5 Americans are on debt to credit card companies
Yeah.
and going further in debt every month, paying over 20% interest. Why? Because they've been robbed and enslaved with this income tax. We can be prosperous and free again. Where does DOJ get to, and FBI get to the money to do all the stuff, the January 6th demonstrators
Yeah.
and Trump? What, with the money that we pay them. So we're paying these criminals to do what they do. We got to defund, not the police, defund the federal
Yeah.
government. And
Defund the
that's
federal
what Field
government.
Moss was leading, and restore freedom instead.
I mean, I think I'm halfway with you. I just worry about like Social Security. So you say that who's legally only required to, just the territories? Why are they required to pay Social Security, but the rest of the 50 states aren't?
Because the federal government was given Washington, D.C. as an independent place to be not under the thumb of any of the states. If it
Right.
was headquartered in New York or Pennsylvania, they could have pushed the thumb on that new government way back in late 1700s. So they gave it DC to be independent, and any land that they acquire from the states, like for military installations, stuff like that.
So
So
Guam and
they give the federal government the power to do whatever you want to do in that little land, which was a
mm,
10-mile square of swamp. They never imagined, the founding fathers, that they're going to deceive us. They use the term United States. We think they mean the 50 states combined. But in the law, they mean D.C. They can
and
do
the
whatever they
territories.
want in Washington, D.C. per the Constitution. It's not a state.
Yeah,
It's
right.
the land of the federal government, and the Constitution literally does not apply in the
In the
District of
actual state.
Columbia per the U.S. Supreme Court.
So if you live on a territory like Guam, then you are living on federal land,
That's right.
technically. And so that's why,
Correct.
so you would owe, so Guam, they owe federal taxes?
No. Back in 1913, they did. In 1913, the federal income tax applied to D.C. and all of its federal territories. Over decades, they took out all of the U.S. territories. And by 1959, only the District of Columbia was left and its people to be taxed with the federal income taxes.
Why did they remove, I mean, why would the government decide to not have more money? So what caused them to remove the territories from federal income tax?
Because it didn't matter. They deceived their people in the 50 states where people actually live to pay the tax. It didn't matter if few people in Guam or Virgin Islands don't pay income taxes. So few people live in there. That's why.
Mm. So people in DC, they don't have any state tax. They just pay one tax, federal government, that's it?
Well, they can have, they do have also a state, a sort of a state tax in DC, also their own municipal tax. They have that on top of that, just like California. They do.
But that's the DC tax. That's a Washington DC city tax, you're saying, like
Yeah, exactly.
a municipality tax. They don't have a
Yes.
state tax though. They don't have they don't have
They're
to
not
pay
a state.
Virginia or Maryland. Right.
Right.
Okay. So they have to pay a Washington DC state or a city tax. Just like I pay a city tax, California, I have to pay a city tax in Los Angeles, then I have to pay the state tax, right? Then I got the federal government tax, like multiple layers of taxation going on here. But you're saying I don't have to pay federal taxes. But what about the people that, okay, they're in trouble, they've got problems with their taxes, they are listening to you, they decide to go sign up for your Freedom Law School, they hear you out and they say, wow, okay, I don't have to pay taxes anymore. At what point could a person they would have to clear up all their other tax issues, make sure that they have no problems with the IRS, there's no back owed taxes before they could really start this?
Nope. They can immediately start living a free life. Do not sign any more 1040 form under oath, swearing you owe the IRS money. No more rope around your neck to go to prison for 9 years for that one signature on that 1040 form.
Do any accountants work with you? Do you find that accountants say, "Look, Peymon, I hear you, but I don't want to file I don't want to file any of your." Well, you don't file taxes at all because you live in Florida. So you're saying you don't you don't even need an accountant at all, do you?
That's right.
Okay, but I would
And
think
to
that
answer your question, yes, I've had multiple accountants and CPAs check out Freedom Law School, and they said, "Wow, Peymon, you're right," because everything I say, Kim, is based upon U.S. government's official legal websites. I don't give no opinion. I rely only on their own official legal websites at freedomlawschool.org. It's all there for free.
So they've been able to deceive people into paying income tax. People aren't fighting back on this. It is really it is surprising and shocking that over the years
Mhm.
from 1913,
Mhm.
tiny little tax, and then of course the wars. It's always war, right? I mean, it's just like 9/11. After
Mhm.
9/11, they were like, "Oh, okay, now we have to take your freedoms away. We have
Mhm.
to you have to take your shoes off every time you go through an airport still." After
Mhm.
9/11, you can't. I mean, it's just absurd. They never give us these freedoms back. It's always under the guise of we've got to do it for safety and security. And so
Mhm.
they've been able to inflate the taxation on us over the years.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe it would have been okay if they just said, okay, social security tax and some sort of medical tax so that you can go. Because I mean, I hear you with the ER, and I know the ER is a giant money suck. But the problem is that there's a lot of people who don't. I mean, what is the alternative? I don't want to, I hear these horror stories of students that travel to Thailand, for example, or other places, and they get into a car accident and they rush to the ER on their deathbed, nearly dying, and they turn them away because they can't access the cash that they need in order to pay for the services right then and there. They can't get a hold of their families in the United States, and their kids die. I mean, so many of these. So we want an emergency room that is actually going to treat people and do that type of care, whether or not they can pay for it. I don't want firefighters, for example, to show up to my house and say, are you able to pay for I mean, we'll put out the fire, but can you
But that's
pay
paid
for
by
it?
your state taxes. Remember, the firemen are paid by your state taxes. And about the medical care, again, remember, your country, your state can choose to have taxes to pay for those things. The people of the state can choose, hey, we want to have this tax or that tax to cover people at emergencies at the hospital. We'll take care of them. That's what America is so beautiful. 50 countries, each country can do these things as the people choose to. We don't need the federal overlords in that distant DC empire to rule us in that and then use it against us with the DOJ, FBI literally working against the American people. And Homeland Security is have open borders for invaders to come here illegally because they want to eventually have these guys vote communist Democrat so America becomes a communist country and you could never get it back again. That's their goal.
Yeah, I mean, I one thing that made me really appreciate the United States was the COVID pandemic. I have to say that I used to kind of dream about living in other countries, thinking that they ran better, or they had better governments or whatever. But the COVID pandemic did teach me that we do have 50 different countries in this country, and if you don't like we saw many people move around in the country from the COVID pandemic when they said, "Wait a minute, this is crazy in California. I'm getting out of here and I'm moving to Florida. I'm moving to Texas. I'm moving somewhere else. I don't want to live under this." I live in LA. We had really strict restrictions here, but I'm from Idaho, and I would fly home to Idaho and visit, and I would be, I'm free. I'm free. I can actually go around and do what I want because Idaho didn't have all those restrictions. And so I appreciated that a lot more. And so I think you have a point that because that's kind of always been my issue with the libertarian viewpoint. As much as I agree with libertarians on so many things, I could never be a full libertarian because I say, oh yeah, but I don't want the firefighter to show up to my house and say, yeah, well, let me see
Mhm,
what kind of gems you got to make sure you
mhm,
can pay for this. If we're going to rescue your house.
mhm,
But you're right. If it's just okay, well, the state would decide. So you would decide in your state, your little country, your enclave would decide how you
mhm,
want to run. And if you
mhm,
don't like it, you could move to another enclave. You could move to another country inside of the federation, right?
mhm.
And you could
Correct.
say, well,
America's a union of 50 states is something we're not taught in a public full system. Again, who wants to have the firefighter to stop and say, I'm not sure if I want to put out the fire. Everywhere in America, communities got together back in 1800s
yeah,
and formed fire departments. They had a little extra property tax to pay for that. People do those common sense things.
yeah.
Sheriffs, policemen, roads, people do those things. We don't have to worry about it all fall apart. What we don't need is this empire in DC who's now turning around and using money against the American people. And you know what? Something else, Kim? Right now, people are woken up with the Trump trials, with the January 6th demonstrators being attacked viciously, and the BLM Black Lives Matter people destroyed the scot-free, they're seeing, wow, the federal government is really out of control.
Yeah.
They really are our enemies. You know what? I knew that 30 years ago. The Department of Injustice has been corrupt since at least 1913 because they wrote the laws deceptively, knowing the people of the 50 states don't have to pay income tax, but they enforced it as if you do have to pay income
Yeah.
tax. It's
Is
about time for people to wake up.
You've mentioned the Constitution. Does this only apply to American citizens? So could you have gotten away with this before you were an American citizen?
Yeah, because I'm not from DC. The income tax applies only to citizens and residents of DC. I used to live in LA and Orange County and San Bernardino. I was not part of the District of Columbia, so I don't have to pay income tax as a foreigner, green card holder, or American citizen.
But when you lived here in California, you paid state tax.
No, because
How
California follows federal law and federal definitions. So I didn't
What?
file state either.
So you don't have to pay state tax in California. Are there certain states you do have to pay taxes in because they don't follow federal law?
Yes, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Alabama, Mississippi and Arkansas. Only
That's
those
it?
5 states have independent from federal definitions and forms that you have to pay income tax. They don't piggyback on the federal system.
So you're saying that for myself as a California resident, I don't have to, as long as I don't file California taxes and I don't file federal taxes, I just don't file the papers, that I don't have to pay any taxes in this state or to the country. They just would collect my sales tax, right? When I go shopping and when I get gas at the pump, right? I pay taxes here and there on a variety of things that consumption taxes. Would
Mhm.
there be any other tax I'd have to pay other than consumption?
Property tax,
Oh, right. Yeah, I hate
sales
property
tax,
tax. To
alcohol,
me, that's
tobacco.
one of the worst things out there is property tax.
Well, property tax is a foundation tax that paid for a local sheriff and a prosecutor and a judge to keep bad guys away. You watch your westerns, you see John Wayne and Clint Eastwood, who paid for the sheriff. They paid the property owners in the area paid a little bit for that. But the problem is we become socialist, and now the tax rates are so high,
Yeah.
they become oppressive to pay for all the socialist stuff. Like California requires you to have health insurance, so you got to become poor again, just like Canada, just like Europe, who's become socialist. That's what makes America so great. You don't have to stay in California. You can bring your grandma and your mom to Florida, and like me, live free in a free state of Florida if you choose or not.
Well, you're saying I could live in California for free.
You could, but remember, California is a lawless, communist country. Okay? The courts there are so corrupt, they deliberately, knowingly ignore the law. The federal courts are much better. I mean, I hate to say it, but I saw California go down since 1980s very fast. It wasn't this bad. I'm 61 years old, and it's very sad. They want to turn America into communism, but they don't call it communist.
Right.
All Democrats. But the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about California, though, is, I mean, in my experience of working with the IRS and working with the California Tax Board, is that the California Tax Franchise Board is the mob. I mean, they will
Yes.
come after you. If you don't file and pay taxes for 1 year, they will. There was one time, I don't remember what exactly the issue was, where I think I had filed, but I'd owed them, it was like a measly $150. I mean, it was literally like 100 and they said it was 800, but then when I did, this was like 10 years ago, when I did when I then ended up filing, so this was before I filed. When I then ended up filing, it ended up I only owed them $150 actually, right? But they were trying to say $800. But even for the $800, I mean, I woke up one morning with a message on my phone that said, "We have confiscated every last dime you have." I mean, they don't quite say it like that, but they pretty much do. They're like, "Hello, good morning. It's the California mob, and we have now completely seized your bank accounts. We have frozen everything. You can't access your credit cards. You can't access your bank accounts. You have no money. You need to call us." And I went around frantically looking at all my bank accounts, looking at the credit cards. Everything was zeroed out. The credit card says you can't be used. I had to call the California Tax Franchise Board. When I called them, the guy, it sounded like a mobster. He's like, "What took you so long? You know, why didn't you call us earlier? You could have just handled this earlier." And then I gave him his money, and they opened up my bank accounts again. Then when I did the filing, they had to send me a check back. They had to send me like $700 back. But it was all over a measly $150 that they shook me down like the mob. I mean, it was insane. Whereas the IRS, I feel like is a lot easier to work with. Maybe because they know you don't really have to pay these federal taxes.
Well, the IRS is a very failing organization. They're in terrible shape. IRS, they force collections or levies and garnishments on people's bank accounts and paychecks has gone down in over the last 13 years by over 90%. They are in really bad shape. On the other hand, California Franchise Tax Board is the most organized and lawless mafia out there. I
Yeah.
tell a lot of Californians, sorry, you live in a state of the mob, so maybe you file California pay them because they're so ruthless, oppressive. What happened, Kim, to a government by, of, for, with the people? It doesn't exist in California and the common states of New York, Hawaii, Massachusetts. People have to flee literally to Florida and other free states like Idaho and Tennessee to breathe halfway free.
I'm looking at the history of the IRS right now, saying that it was formed in 1862, though the name originates in 1918. So that's when they, like you said, after they came up with the income tax and they finally came up with the IRS. And they're saying that the history of this is that during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln and Congress passed the Revenue Act of 1862, creating the Office of Commissioner of Internal Revenue and enacting a temporary income tax to pay war expenses. That's what it was supposed to be. Well, what the heck happened?
They repealed that in 1870s. Then in 1913, they claimed that they ratified the 16th Amendment to change the Constitution. But the Supreme Court clearly said more than once that 16th Amendment of the Constitution did not give Congress any new taxing powers. So if direct taxes before then had to be divided up or apportioned among the states, they still have to be divided up and apportioned among the states. But nobody argued the definition of the term United States in tax law, which means District of Columbia. That 1040 form, Kim, is a District of Columbia individual income tax return, not the 50 states individual income tax return.
I tell you what, Peymon, if I go tell my husband right now, I'm going to stop paying, I'm going to stop paying taxes. He's going to say, no, you're not. You're not.
Of course, he's going to tell you that. Look, don't believe me. I tell you, but do not believe me. Go to freedomlawschool.org. There's 7 steps for people to free themselves of deception that leads to fear and then robbery and enslavement by the IRS. So first step is to be educated.
Yeah.
And on step 1 is follow the law. There's a 9-minute video on step 1 on the law from U.S. government's official legal websites. You see that with your husband tonight. He's going to say, you were right. This is not some opinion. This is from U.S. government's official legal websites. And he's going to say, I need to watch more of this and be free.
Well, he's a lawyer, so he should be, I'll show him the code and say, read this and you decide, you tell me what this law says.
Wrong, I'll give him $10,000. He's my publicly, folks. If Kim's husband can show me I'm wrong on the law, I'll pay him $10,000 and I'll announce it on Kim's show that I was wrong. I'm sorry for misleading the American people. So there you go. Take this deal to your husband. Say, here's a challenge for you, honey.
Yeah. Okay. I will. I will definitely do that. He'll like this challenge. Peymon, so people to, in order for people, I know a lot of people are going to be interested in this. I'm interested in this. I'm interested in this for the reason of maybe I don't stop paying my taxes. Maybe I keep paying my taxes because I'm afraid. But if they've been robbing us for this long in a scheme that they shouldn't be doing. I mean, this is a scandal. This is outrageous that the government would just gaslight us into believing, oh, you owe us all this money. You owe us like half of your income, guys.
Mhm.
I mean, and it's so short-sighted of them, knowing that this is how governments in the past, monarchies fell. They fell when they started taxing the people to death, and people just felt like, "I work hard and the government takes all my money. The king takes my money away. The monarchy takes my money." That is where we're at right now, and they're so short-sighted to not realize that people are eventually gonna get fed up. I mean, at 30% of our income going to the government right now is insane. But we've dealt with it and we just take it like, "Oh, okay. I guess that's what we have to do."
Kim, the big, powerful banks and corporations, military, industrial complex, and media, all these rich companies and powerful interests, they use it to milk us. They steal from all of us through federal government. They want to keep doing this thing. But what's going on is that people got to realize the federal government has been turned upside down. This is not the George Washington federal government anymore that's supposed to protect us. They turn upside down. They're going after us, the American people. You have no legal, ethical, constitutional, or moral duty to pay any money to enemies in Washington, D.C. You can do what the founding fathers did. When the King of England would not stop abusing the colonists, English colonists at the time, Washington and company said, we're not going to pay you any more taxes that they legally owed. Now we're going to stop paying taxes we never legally owed in the first step. But the main thing is deception. I know this is cognitive dissonance. I can't believe it. It's so unbelievable. I never heard about this. How could it be? I
Yeah.
know that's what you all are thinking. I'm telling you, brothers and sisters, and Kim, you go to freedomlawschool.org, start with the law, the 9-minute video there, and start the journey to freedom. Don't be afraid to check out Corona was a lie or the income tax is a lie. They lied to us with the corrupt major media. The IRS is just one more lie amongst all the other lies they told us.
Oh, Peymon, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate this. I'm gonna put the link down to your Freedom Law School down below so that people can start the process of learning about this. I'm afraid they're gonna come after me now.
I'll
Oh,
protect you. Don't worry. We have a plan, Restore Freedom Land, that protects all of our members, and we guarantee IRS will not put you in prison or take any of your money. All of us will reimburse you. No
wow.
fear. Remember,
Okay.
God is love, Satan is fear. You let your godly love of truth act rather than a satanic. Be afraid, lock down, double mask. Instead, enlighten yourself, read, educate, breathe free, and you can be smiling with confidence, just like me, Kim.
All right, Peymon. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Well, that was an interesting conversation. Very, very, and believable. I think that everybody should be looking into this. Like I said, this could be the greatest scandal that has been put upon the American people. The tax fraud that apparently the government has been enacting on the American people, and it makes sense. It makes sense that they would start this when they started the Fed. That they just kept using endless wars in order to get us to pay these taxes. Very interesting conversation. The links are down below for you to learn more for yourself. Email me, tell me your thoughts. I would love to hear from you, Kim@KimIversen.com. Otherwise, guys, we will be back on Monday with another great show. Same time, same place, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday. Bye bye.